Hello, this is Rope a Cowboy, and the message of the day is fuck Peta. Fuck them. They don't make any sense, and they're lunatics, and just watch the video.
Save a horse, ride a cowboy. Everybody says, save a horse, ride a cowboy.
On YouTube I stumbled across this video, and at first it looked like a news video because it started out with the news segment. Apparently in New York City, a carriage horse got spooked and ran into a car and crashed, and the horse was a little bit shaken, and, maybe some people were injured, they weren't sure.
Chaotic scene in Manhattan after a carriage horse collides with a car near Central Park, dumps passengers on the street, and runs wild in Midtown. New York One's Michael Herzenberg joins us now with more details. Michael.
Lewis, it appears based on witness statements that everyone involved in this incident should be okay, but here at 60th and Broadway, this is where the horse actually collided with a double parked vehicle. Passengers were ejected, but it's unclear if that happened at 60th and Broadway or in Columbus Circle. Now, some say that passengers were conscious and walking. We did see video of one person being taken away by an ambulance, taken away in a neck brace and on a board, but this was quite an experience even for those who just saw the commotion.
And turns out the horse is fine anyway.
Now in this vicinity, 2 passengers were ejected from the carriage. The horse took off to 57th and 9th, was corralled by cops and collapsed in shock and exhaustion. Eventually police did get the horse up. Witnesses say the horse had a bruise to its side, and you might be able to see blood on its nose. Witnesses say that the horse was originally spooked in Central Park and threw the driver, and then the horse took off with 2 passengers in the carriage. The horse kicked at least 1 pedestrian and damaged a yellow cab. The animal then collided with a double parked car at 60th and Broadway.
And I thought, oh, whoa, holy shit, who got injured? Like, what person got injured? That was my instinct when I saw the little intro. But no, it turns out that the rest of it is this video from Peta's activism against, the cruelty of horses. And then I was thinking, like, are you serious? Is this for real? But it just kept playing about, and it was for real, and I was really confused. Apparently, horses are more important than people. And so the first part was the news segment, and the second part was this bitchy, cunty voiced woman holding a camera, and I know she's a cunt because she just says things like completely self-absorbed, and I say this because she says like, oh, what's wrong with you? She's like taking a video of this horse on the ground because it just got slammed into a car and it's in shock, and there are people around the horse, trying to help it up, trying to take off the equipment, and she's like, oh, you fuckers for doing this to this poor innocent animal. And then she said, oh, get out of the way, I need to film this.
Traffic.
Get out of the way. What is the matter with you people? You son of a bitches. Get out of the way! I need this on tape, you guys.
So that I can look good in the animal rights world. She doesn't even help the fucking horse. The other people help the horse. And then when it gets up finally, she's like, yay! But fuck her. I mean, okay, first of all, it's nobody's fault, really, that the horse got spooked and crashed into a car. The car did not crash into the horse. Now you could say, if you know horses a little bit better, you can tell when they're gonna spook, and you can be like in tune to them and, prepare them for situations like that so it's less likely that they get spooked. But to say that that's animal abuse because that happens, I mean, what the fuck would they say about Like, people get hit by cars all the time too, and it's an accident. But they're not for that. They don't care about people. They're just like, oh, poor horse. And I love horses. I ride horses, and they're great animals. But to put that like on a pedestal, like so much more important than the health and safety of people, is just beyond me. I can't even fathom it. And so after this segment of her saying like, oh, you people are horrible, and people are like walking by like, oh, you're disgusting, what the fuck, you fuckers.
It's all you fucking assholes. Go.
And I'm like, what the? They're trying to help the horse, and you're yelling at them. It's an accident. Who the hell are you going to blame? The horse? They just need someone to blame. And then the next segment is, oh my god. It goes on this weird tangent for this female actress is like, imagine a world where you had to work long hours, day and night.
Imagine for a moment that you're forced to do hard physical labor all day, 7 days a week, whether it's sweltering hot or freezing cold outside. At the end of the day, instead of relaxing on an easy chair or sleeping in a comfortable bed, you're locked in a tiny closet all night long. That's what it's like for horses who are forced to pull carriages in New York City.
What's your point? And then they go on and on about the conditions of the horses, and oh wow, they have to walk up steps. You know, because you should just put them in a barn in the pasture in New York City. So, oh no, you know, the buildings aren't designed for horses.
And climb up steep ramps to reach the upper floors of the multi-story Midtown stables where they're kept when they aren't working. These stables are nothing more than run-down buildings that were never designed to house horses.
No shit! They're in fucking New York City! And I'm not saying, like, I'm not advocating for the carriage horses, because they're trying to ban them for a long time, and I agree that, you know, there is a profit motive. There is, you know, some motivation to treat them shitty, but they've had regulations for a long time to get rid of that. They limit the days they can work. They increase the stable size.
Lying down is so uncomfortable that they often can't get the deep, restorative sleep that they need. So these overworked animals constantly suffer from fatigue. Even the stables that have slightly larger stalls, resting comfortably is often impossible because the stalls lack adequate bedding and are full of feces.
We use straw for bedding, and it's recycled at a mushroom farm. Plenty of room for a horse to lie down and or turn around.
They have vet inspections. They did all of that. And the animal rights activists still aren't pleased. They're like, horses should be free running in a pasture and shouldn't be our slaves. Bitches. The last time I checked, the definition for slave is a person who has to work against their will for another person, or a person owned by another person. It's not an animal. And I'm sorry, but I don't think animals are people. I really don't. They don't behave like people do. They don't govern each other and protest and whatever the fuck. Animals are not people. Some animals resemble certain things that people do, but they're not people. And yes, they are sentient beings. I understand that. But if we weren't using them, they wouldn't exist. They would starve. okay, so these carriage horses, they want to get rid of the carriage horses, and I'll give them a happy pasture to like run around and play in and then never work or be useful. Well, guess what? That doesn't happen with horses. You know what happens to horses when they're no longer useful? You know what happens to them? They die. They go down to the border and they go down up to Mexico and they get slaughtered. And I'm not saying that to be, you know, cynical or whatever. That's just the way it is. That's what happens to horses. And since they made horse slaughter illegal in the US, guess what? They're traveling thousands of miles to get slaughtered, and it's in worse conditions and it's not regulated. So thank you, PETA, for doing that to horses. And fuck you. I mean, there are obvious cases when it's abuse, like horse racing, for instance, when they run these yearlings and their bones aren't developed yet and then they break, and that's horrible. Yeah, kudos to you for exposing that. But there's no real abuse happening. Oh yeah, and by the way, in the end of the video, there's this segment where this same cunty woman sees like a tiny drop of blood in the horse's nose, and she's like, by the way, did you know that your horse is bleeding? I'm not an activist. It's not an activism thing. I just want to know.
Well, the horse is bleeding. Did you know his horse is bleeding? Do you know your horse is bleeding from the nose? This has nothing to do with protesting. I'm just telling you. Do you know he's bleeding through his nostril?
No.
Huh?
Does he not care?
It was just such a tiny little drop of blood. I mean, if you don't even know anything about horses and why they get nosebleeds, you know that people get nosebleeds all the time, right? Like, sometimes it doesn't happen, sometimes you're like picking your nose or whatever and you get a nosebleed. And you don't need to go to the hospital, it just stops bleeding, and that's fine. She sees a tiny drop of blood in the horse's nose and she's like, oh, it's animal abuse and blah. And by the way, I looked up nosebleeds for horses, and it says, well, it looks really horrible, but unless they're losing a significant amount of blood, and if it doesn't stop bleeding on its own, unless they're really losing a lot of blood, you don't even need to contact a vet at all. And that's for like huge nosebleeds, and she's making a big deal about like one speck of blood. But it is not worth the reaction of, oh, you're so horrible. Who do you think you are? Person who actually makes horses work and gives them a job. Stupid. It's just so infatuated with emotion and nothing else. They can't even look at it logically. Like, hey, this horse actually has a job. You know how many few horses have like a really legitimate job? Like, those are the horses that propagate and continue to live. Because they're useful to humans. I'm sorry. But that's why they're here. They're useful to humans. And if you set them free, guess what? They're gonna die. They're gonna get hit by cars, which I guess you're not for because you don't want them to be hit by cars in this instance. And they have a worse life if they're... Even Mustangs have a worse off life. They have predators. They could, you know, break a leg in a prairie dog hole or a foxhole or whatever the hell. They get worms. They have to fight with other horses to compete for anything. I mean, the logic is so it's just not present at all. And why do we still have PETA? What the especially in this instance, in the carriage horse instance, it seems like they've already basically done everything to protect horses. Like, there's very little that they have left to do. And they still complain about, like, oh, these beddings are filled with feces and they can't roll around in it and it's not good enough for them to lay down. Bullshit. There are pictures of horses laying down in their stalls. And then they come and say, oh, well, it's not very big, the stall that they're laying down in. And it's like, what the fuck do you even want? What do you really want? Because it seems to me like you don't know anything about horses and how they were bred and used to work for thousands of years. They were bred to work. Just like, if you don't know anything about animal husbandry, then I don't even know how to help you. Like, if you take a husky, for example, when you go take it for a walk, it's going to instinctively pull against you because it was bred to do that. If you take a border collie and you have a few 3-year-olds, it's instinctually going to herd them and make sure they're all in the same place. Because they were bred to do that. Do you understand? They were bred to work. Come on, with all this injustice in the world and how unequal people are, you're really going to stand there and say animals need to be as equal as people are and they need to have like a social security number and be able to vote. So anyway, I don't think that animals are... I mean, they are sentient beings, but they're not on the same level with people. You can't personify them so much. The best thing to do with animals is to study each kind of animal individually, because really, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, and it's really embarrassing when anyone with any kind of knowledge comes along and says, hey, you know, this is how they are, this is how, you know, this is how they live, and this is what they actually need. And the only real big violation, I think, is that the horses, they can't run around in a field and socialize and actually be able to graze and like... But think about it, they're getting the exercise, obviously, and they're being taken care of in every other possible way they could be taken care of. It's not the worst, it's not the best thing ever, it's not the worst thing ever. And that's the problem I have with PETA, is because they nitpick things that you would never think should be even an issue, and they turn it into this big thing. If they just went after like really horrid animal abuse, and let's get rid of this really disgusting, really, you know, unfair and unjust slaughtering practices and whatever, and marked regulations that improve it because of whatever. Like, if they were just about that, I could tolerate them a lot more, and it would be a lot easier to put up with their rallies or whatever. But when they just pretend to know what an animal's thinking and how it's feeling and how it perceives its environment, like you really think the horse is just like, oh, well, this box is so small, I don't even want to go in this stall. You guys are totally abusing me. But how do you know the horse is even thinking that? How do you even know that? So, yeah, screw PETA. I mean, we could devote our time to so many other useful things and useful protests, and just the thought that everything is so great already. Like, oh yeah, men and women are totally equal, by the way. It's time to focus on animals now. Yeah, minimize their suffering when it's obvious. But like getting your noses in someone else's business and how they take care of their animals when they're obviously not, when the animal's obviously not, you know, on the threat of like dying or whatever, and you're not really rescuing them from certain demise. And I'm not saying that their life is great, but it's better than being killed and shipped to slaughter, which is exactly what would happen if they were just released or, you know, sold or whatever. And yeah, there are some people who have a good heart and take them in and blah blah blah. There aren't many people like that. And it just comes to show that if you don't have a job, you really don't get by. And that goes the same way with people. So, I don't understand you, PETA. I I don't get the point in all of this. I don't know what it's doing. You think you're doing good. You think you can read their minds and just predict what the horse is thinking and what it likes. But that's not true, and you're arrogant, and you don't have the telepathic ability to understand what a horse is thinking. I'm sorry that you thought that. I'm sorry that you know, had that impression, or someone let you believe that, but it's not true. And you should fuck off. Bye!